early voting is not over yet, so any analysis of it is very problematic. As I said, so far it doesn't look like the early voting is similar to what it was in 2008 and 2012. It's a slightly better turnout so far for Republicans, just in general terms. What really matters is the ground game the two parties have. Once the early voting is over and they see what they need to do to win on Election Day, it's who has the capacity to do that. The numbers for Hillary Clinton are still very troubled in terms of the enthusiasm black voters and young voters express for her candidacy. I do not know what she does at this point to make that constituency more excited. Maybe the fact that she used email makes her seem hipper? I don't know. I just hope what they didn't find was she was doing what Anthony Weiner was, because I just don't want that in my head. I don't want that in my head. As we talked before, no straight ticket voting. Interesting dynamic with the bleed off and these skippers. The interesting, as you saw in the chart, in the 2012 election, just about everybody who voted in the presidential race. Recently, as a month ago, 5 to 7% of voters in polls say they just were not going to vote in the presidential race. So we'll have to see if that actually comes to pass. I give up. No idea. I give up. I don't know what the impact is. It's just too hard to tell. It's too hard to tell. Again, where there's likely to be impact in legislative races, it's in suburban districts. A few outliers in that regard, but principally that's the dynamic in North Carolina now. Those suburban districts, they're not as partisan in their orientation, and the voters are more likely to flip on a particular issue set. Again, legislative races likely to come down as much as anything to personal relationships that the candidates have. Who won the fist fight might become the more important factor. The Clinton campaign, their effort to run up the score, they have a ton of money and a very well-organized effort here. It does not seem to be helping. The problem is not that they're poorly organized, it's that people don't like their candidate. And again, this is historically, for the Democratic candidate to win statewide, you've got to have the total percentage of turnout of all voters. About 22% of that needs to be African American. When Obama won the state in 2008, about twice the number of voters under the age of 35 turned out in that election than typically do, and mostly in the major metropolitan areas. And even then, think about that. Twice the turnout, 22%, he won by 14,000 votes. So it's not a slam dunk. Even at 21%, it starts to be incrementally more difficult for the Democrat to win statewide. For Burr to win, I think he's just got to keep the pedal to the metal, as it were. I think Ross has got to really hope that this stuff with Clinton doesn't hurt other candidates. I think at this point I'd say the race leans Burr's way. The governor's got to continue to try to work to displace whatever negative impact he's had from House Bill 2, principally among white suburban women. Cooper, interestingly enough, the thing people don't realize, Cooper's been in politics a long time. This was the first election he had ever been a candidate in which he had to debate an opponent. He had never been in a candidate's debate before, his entire political career. And so to some extent, Cooper's performance as a candidate, strangely enough, I would say this, it's like they hadn't anticipated being up. And so when he had the opportunity to kind of leverage whatever marginal advantage he had, they didn't seem to be able to sort of run the score. So we'll have to see. I think for Cooper now, he's got to try to maintain this margin, and I'm not sure what that formula is for him. I think so much more of the attention is now going to be shifted to the presidential race. If McCrory is able to continue his momentum in this coming week, that may be enough just to win incrementally. I'd say at the end of the day, most of what a re-election for a governor is about is a referendum on the economy. And the truth is, McCrory has a good story to tell. And Cooper really hasn't been able to articulate what he would do differently to affect the same economic results. So at this point, it's too close to call. But we'll see if McCrory does get some continued momentum. If it does start to close, I think McCrory has a good chance to win, but it'll be very, very close. And again, the partisan numbers in the legislature, tough to tell exactly, but I still think the Republicans retain control. It's probably a few fewer seats than they have now, but I'd still say the Republicans will control both House and Senate.